For Comedy Hype News, I'm Dom Smith. Supposedly, there's very few things that's more American than the First Amendment. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution prohibits the government from making laws that control free speech, press, expression, religion, or the right to protest.
Man, it's not that serious. The First Amendment is first for a reason. The Second Amendment is just in case the first one doesn't work out.
Despite this law, the list of comedians that have gotten in trouble over their words is endless. Back in the day, there were some comedians who were even arrested over their routines. They were arrested because some people found their act to be obscene or indecent. When Eddie Murphy Raw was released in 1987, it set the record for most uses of the word f*** in a theatrical movie for a total of 223 times. That record has since been broken, but can you imagine if someone found Eddie Murphy Raw to be obscene or indecent? There would be no Def Comedy Jam. The Federal Communication Commission, otherwise known as the FCC, is a government agency. All broadcast television and radio must follow FCC regulations. If not, they're subjected to a fine, but sometimes the penalties can be much, much worse. We made a list of some notable comedians who were almost shut down by the government. First on the list is Keenen Ivory Wayans in In Living Color. Throughout the run of In Living Color, Keenen was constantly going back and forth with network censors. I didn't have an antagonistic relationship with the censors. I wasn't irrational. I knew there were restrictions. It was more about how far can I go? Like, just tell me where the line is. The frustration was that that line was moved week to week. So you could do something one week, but if they got mail, you couldn't do it the next. We were constantly in that dance. In Living Color was so popular, Fox aired a Doritos-sponsored live episode during the halftime show of Super Bowl 26. During halftime, nearly 22 million viewers switched from CBS to Fox to see the show. Figure skaters Brian Boitano and Dorothy Hamill performed. Whose idea was that? Switching to In Living Color was a no-brainer. The following year, the Super Bowl got Michael Jackson to perform during halftime, and a high-profile star has performed at halftime ever since. Wayans joked that Fox was going to have snipers planted throughout the set and said, "There will be 7-second delay buttons all around." So it goes to show even the network was weary about broadcasting a raunchy, unpredictable show live on air. Keenen dealt with the censors so much, he figured out a way to outsmart executives by using black slang.
All these Jamaican slang, bomba-clad and all this stuff, and he had no idea what it meant. It was just gibberish to him.
Next on the list is George Carlin. One of Carlin's most famous bits is called 7 Words You Can Never Say on Television. The bit made its debut on his 1972 album, Class Clown. Carlin was actually put in cuffs for doing the routine at a show in Milwaukee that same year. The charge was for disturbing the peace. Now, there was never an official list of forbidden words from TV. This list was made up by Carlin for flow. The joke was featured in a radio broadcast, which led to a Supreme Court decision in the case FCC versus Pacifica Foundation. Pacifica was the radio company that broadcasted the joke. The case helped federal government regulate speech on radio and television. CBS executive John Douglas heard the broadcast while he was driving with his 15-year-old son. Douglas filed a complaint with the FCC, claiming the material was inappropriate for the time of day, 2 p.m. Pacifica received a letter of reprimand from the FCC, who determined the broadcast to be indecent. Pacifica challenged the complaint in court. As a result, the US Supreme Court ruled that the routine was indecent, but not obscene. In 1994, Martin Lawrence hosted Saturday Night Live for the first and last time. During the opening monologue, Lawrence joked about female hygiene and told women in the audience that they need to wash themselves and douche properly.
I know women go through vaginal changes that they just can't help sometimes.
The jokes were considered controversial, but Lawrence says he used the jokes during rehearsal and didn't receive any complaints.
If you don't eat right, if you take the wrong antibiotics, if you wear the wrong panties, they could be sensitive to all that shit. And boom, I know your shit, it acts up. The vaginal thing acts up.
The network, on the other hand, says differently. They say he drifted in unscripted and unapproved material. After the airing of the show on the East Coast, the monologue was edited after NBC received nearly 200 complaints. Only transcripts are available of the full monologue, but the female hygiene joke appears in the 1994 stand-up film, You So Crazy, as Martin's closing bit. Syndicated versions of the SNL episode cut Lawrence off before he gets to the topic, and this message is shown. At this point in the monologue, Martin begins a commentary of what he considers the decline in standards of female hygiene in this country. Although we at Saturday Night Live take no stance on the issue one way or the other, network policy prevents us from rebroadcasting this portion of his remarks. In summary, Martin feels, or felt at the time, that the failure of many young women to bathe thoroughly is a serious problem that demands our attention. He explores this problem, citing numerous examples from his personal experience, and ends by proposing several imaginative solutions. It was a frank and lively presentation, and nearly cost us all our jobs. We now return to the conclusion of Martin's monologue. On May 1st, 2017, Stephen Colbert went off on Donald Trump on his show, The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. The joke got more than 5,700 complaints. Indecency, hate speech, and homophobia were the concerns. Parents all over the Midwest complained. Despite all the complaints, the FCC did not take action on Colbert's remarks because the indecency rule only applies to shows between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. The Late Show airs at 11:30 p.m., a time where FCC rules are more relaxed because children are assumed to be asleep. However, even with this rule, it would still be unlikely that indecency would apply because 1, the swear was bleeped out, and 2, Colbert's mouth was blurred.
You talk like a sign language gorilla who got hit in the head. In fact, the only thing your mouth is good for is being Vladimir Putin's holster.
In the end, Colbert would avoid a fine. Lenny Bruce was yet another comedian who ran into trouble with the law over his stand-up act. Lenny Bruce first took the stage in 1947 and became a household name by the early 60s. Bruce's act was profane and touched on politics, religion, race, and sex. People had never heard or seen anything like it before. They were surprised by his language and subject matter. Many considered Bruce's act to be obscene because he was constantly arrested for his performances. He was arrested in 1961 in San Francisco and charged with violating the California obscenity law. He was also arrested in 1962 on 2 separate occasions, one in Los Angeles where he beat the charge, and the other in Chicago where he was convicted. In 1963, he was ordered to leave England for his words and was arrested the following year for obscenity laws again. Bruce eventually moved to New York City. In one performance, undercover investigators sat in on 2 of his shows, recorded them, and presented them to a grand jury. The district attorney's office claimed that Bruce violated a New York law that barred obscene, indecent, immoral, and impure material for entertainment, which would tend to the corruption of the morals of the youth and others. The club's owner was also arrested for allowing Bruce to perform the material in the first place. Dozens of celebrities came to Bruce's defense. Bruce hired a number of First Amendment attorneys, and the courtroom listened to tapes of his performances while the undercover cops reenacted the routine. Bruce was eventually convicted and sentenced to 4 months in a workhouse, but got out on bail. Bruce died in 1966 due to a drug overdose. In 2003, several comedians joined free speech advocates in a petition to the governor of New York, George Pataki. This led to the first ever posthumous pardon, 37 years after Bruce's death. Lenny Bruce was definitely an influence in pushing the line in comedy. It's crazy to think that there was a time where comedians were arrested for being controversial, when today, controversial comedians are all too common. Some comedians have even been afraid to say what they really feel for fear of backlash or being canceled. But we hope that those comedians have the courage to say it anyway.
Use it. Don't be afraid. Don't let these bitch-ass niggas button your lip. Say it anyway.
Stay up to date with the latest news and comedy by subscribing here to our YouTube channel and follow Comedy Hype across all social media. For Comedy Hype News, I'm Dom Smith.